All right, so on to the speaker bio. He was born and raised in California. He represents the 23rd District, which is the Inland Empire District. So he came from Southern California all the way to speak to us. So that's, or I guess, all the way from Sacramento to speak to us. Either way, it's impressive that he had come see us. He's guided by the principle that it is the duty of parents to leave to their children a country which can freely worship God, property rights are protected, and government's power is limited. It's great. In 2016, the Military Officers Association of America named Mike its Legislator of the Year. He regularly receives high marks from the National Federation of Independent Business and the California Chamber of Commerce. He and his wife have been married 40 years. They have 3 adult children. And looks like his kids are doing some pretty impressive things as well. Their oldest son, David, works as a legal counsel in Washington, D.C. Their youngest son is operations manager at the Kirby Center, which is a constitutional think tank in the nation's capital. So let's go ahead and give a warm VAC welcome to Senator Mike Morrell.
Well, thank you guys for allowing me to be here. Many places I go, they close the door on me, so thank you. It's good to be here. You know, let me reword that. It's actually great to be out of Sacramento and in a room full of people that are normal. So, thank you. You know, the question I get asked the most, 2 questions I get asked the most that I'm going to share with you. Number 1, how do I stand it going up to Sacramento? I get that asked all the time. I was in business up until about 8 years ago. I owned 2 corporations, a lending company and a real estate company, and I waited till the kids were, you know, gone and out of the house and, you know, looked like they weren't coming back, which is good so far, which is good. We moved and they don't know where we moved to. So, I ran, and I feel it's an honor to serve because I've never been an armchair quarterback. I like to get in the fight, and so I'm just grateful to the good Lord that he's allowing me to do this right now. So it's really not a burden, other than sometimes if you're in Sacramento too long, it does take a piece of your soul. It really wears on you. If you love America, especially many of us are the same age, and you know how we grew up, things are a lot different, right? You don't let your kid drive all over San Jose on their bicycle today, but we would have back in the day, right? So things have changed. I want to recapture that. Don't know if we can, but God gives us the ability to fight, and that's why I ran. And so the second thing is there hope for America? I often get that, or for California, and I do believe that, guys. But I'll share that down the line with you a little bit here. So anyway, 2 things that my dad told me when I was growing up we shouldn't talk about. Do you know what those 2 things are? Religion and politics. So a casual view of history clearly shows that the only way men oppress other men and send them into 1,000 years of bondage or set them free through the institutions of religion and politics. So I'm believing that those are about the most 2 important subjects we should talk about and raise our kids and teach them to our grandkids, because it has so much power over us. When I think that there's only 40 state senators in this state, and they have power to regulate this church now, they have power to tell us how much we can produce, how much of our money we can keep, and then, of course, on education, you know how that's been in the public schools, some of the things that go on there today, you know. And so it's a lot of power in too few people's hands, and so since we're governed by consent and we're a government of, by, and for the people, the real solution is we have to get better at sending those people to represent us. And I just, so we have to upgrade those people we send to represent us. I just pray that people in my district don't upgrade me. So, but California has a lot of challenges, but the reason I'm concerned, I was driving over here today listening to a conservative talk show host saying California's done. But you know, you never know when California's done, my gosh. And another thing, to give up, you can never give up, because California has 40 million people, and you've heard this saying, as California goes, so goes the nation. A lot of truth to that. We send across the United States the good, bad, and the ugly. And so, guys, we have to draw the line in the sand, plant the flag, and fight for our country and for our state, not just for us, but for our children and grandchildren. You know, Proverbs, the book of Proverbs, and this is the whole reason I ran, says a father, one of his responsibilities is leave to his children an inheritance. And so I figured, okay, each of them will get $10, but if that, but I knew that that goes deeper than just money, a financial obligation. It goes about leaving a country that you guys and I were blessed to have so many opportunities, and those opportunities, because of big government, are being sort of taken away. And so those are some of the challenges. You know, I love when I first walked up to the Capitol one night. I went to a reception, my first night on the job. I got in about 9:30, and I had a key card to get in. And, you know, I was impressed, you know, in awe, that big building and the gleaming halls and the shining floors. And I felt pretty cool about those things for about 3 weeks. And then I just kind of want to express to you something from my personal observation, what goes on behind closed doors. Not I'm going to read this, not everything's like this, but much of it is. And it's C.S. Lewis wrote this, and it was his inspiration for the Screw Tape Letters. And the Screw Tape Letters is Screw Tape, a demon, a fictional account speaking to his nephew Wormwood. And he says this, he says, I live in the managerial age, because this is what I want you to picture Sacramento as, okay? I live in the managerial age in a world of administration. The greatest evil is not now done in those sort of dens of crime that Dickens loved to paint. It is not even done in concentration camps or labor camps. In those we see its final results. But it is conceived, ordered, moved, seconded, carried, and minuted in clean, carpeted, warm, and well-lit offices by quiet men with white collars and cut fingernails and smooth-shaven cheeks who do not need to raise their voice. Hence, naturally enough, my symbol for hell is something like that of the bureaucracy of a police state, ladies and gentlemen. And so it's a very dangerous place where we work, very dangerous stuff coming out of Sacramento. And so since we're a government of the people, it is up to me and you guys to be involved, to pass on to the next generation the best that we can. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Okay, good. And so we have some serious work to do. But one of the things I do believe we can win. And I'm not a guy who has false hope. I'm a kind of an odds maker, you know. The chips aren't exactly in our corner right now, but I see a lot of them flowing our way. And it's time to tally the score with 40 years of one-party rule by my friends across the aisle. And it's time to count their results. It's not to knock them or mock them. It's just saying, what have their policies done? And first of all, I just want you to know they call themselves progressives, which is really a nice, isn't that a great term? You want to progress in science and technology, but you don't want to progress in government, because that means they want the expansion of the bureaucratic state. And history has proven over the last 5,000 years that as government expands, liberty contracts, and soon you lose your freedom and your prosperity. So all it is really a nice word for socialism, by the way. And I've stood up on the floor now, the Senate floor, twice accusing them of being socialist. And the first time I did that, I thought they would come unglued and raise their mics and beat me up. And, you know, it just went right over their heads. So I guess if the shoe fits, you wear it, right? And so their policies have ruined our Golden State. When you think about their policies, and I just want to state again, this darn conservative talk show guy today who's from Sacramento really bugged me, because he said those legislators in Sacramento are messing up our state. I hear that a lot. Let me tell you, it's not. It's the guys across the aisle, because every bill that I'm going to mention here today, none of my party have voted on those. Where we fall short, my party, is we play defense too much and we don't go on the offense, ladies and gentlemen. And let me tell you, we're fighting for the soul of our country, and we have to play the offense. And you can do that. You're not kicking me out of here, are you?
Just make sure the mic's in place.
That's the longest I've ever been asked to stay. So, thank you. Well, you know, the highest taxes, you're signing the SB1. You know, you guys, by the way, my friend and I were talking about this the other day, so we posted something on Facebook, and I got my daughter to send me a picture from Arizona, because I forgot it was 211 or 219. Then we did one from Chevron at almost $4 a gallon, and my friend posted his, I posted mine, and we got between he and I, over 4 million views. So people are irate about that, so keep signing those forms wherever you went. There you are, yeah. So keep doing that, because we do have the highest taxes. Last week, some economists, some enlightened economists from the University of Chicago came out to instruct us how to get our state out of debt and make things better for our state. And he suggested raising taxes. So there you go. So, and you guys thought you knew everything. But another thing too, America used to be #1 in education. This is why the founders talked about limiting government's power. It's supposed to be limited and at local control. And I have nothing against Common Core, but here's what I am concerned about. You know, we have a Common Core for 8 years, right? Before that, because our national test standards are going down. At once America was #1, and now we're like number 17th or 19th. California just slipped to 46th in across. And so at one time, though, we were #1. And I don't know, there's a lot of differences, but here's one big one. We had Common Core because we need to get our test scores up. But before that, we had No Child Left Behind by Bush, who I voted for. And that didn't seem to work either. Before that, we had Clinton, who had goals 2000. They never reached their goals. And you can all go all the way back to Jimmy Carter, who made the largest consolidation of power away from the local municipalities into D.C. So after tracking that 40 years, the founders believed that the further government moves away from the people, it becomes less effective. And that's, I think, you know, we've got 40 years of empirical data that when we took local control away from our teachers and put it in D.C., now on Common Core, you have a board, I believe, in history, if my figures are right, it's either 9 or 11 people that decide the history exit exam for all of our students. And so you see, we just keep getting worse because we've neglected the wisdom of the limited constitutional government. And I guarantee if we were to put control and the money back in the hands of those teachers who are intimately acquainted with those students, and let them make some of those decisions along with the parents and the school boards, we would return to something better. But again, big government has proven to once again fail us, and with the most precious asset, and that's our children, ladies and gentlemen. But that's why we need to restore that back. A couple other things too. Look at AB 109, releasing 40,000 prisoners, and these guys are violent prisoners. Another judge is going to release 10,000 of them that are sex offenders back into our street, which places our kids in harm's way. And I think a couple of things too, on what to do with crime. I'm not a policeman, so I don't know. I like some of those Old Testament verses, though, especially the one that says punish wrongdoers severely. And I don't know what the Hebrew word for severely means, but I think it's probably a good word. But another thing, too, you know, I just want to make a point on some of these things. You know, if you remember Bill Clinton, when he ran against Bush #1, he said, it's the economy, stupid, right? You know what it's really, it's about morality. Stupid, not that you guys are stupid. But the thing is, you know, when you look at Lincoln, he talked about, Washington reminded us in his farewell speech, the centerpiece of that speech said, of all the habits and dispositions which lead to political prosperity, morality and religion are indispensable supports. You look at John Locke, Augustine, you look at the Greeks who believed in, you know, virtues and that kind of thing, or you simply look at Christ himself, who has a list of virtues on the Sermon on the Mount, and even going back to Moses, as the children of Israel are leaving captivity after 400 years, he reminds them about 16 times that you're going to be given prosperity, but it's all predicated on you following those moral laws, decrees, and commands. And when I see these poor kids who get shot and the ones that shoot them, I always search to see what kind of family they come from, and 90% of the time it's always from a fatherless home, and the majority of men in prison come from fatherless homes. So, you know, we got a lot of work to do. I agree, it's nice to rehabilitate them, but I think the foundational issue really comes back to God gave kids 2 parents to survive this world, and so somehow the church has to really fight, because that is one of the foundational things that we need to do to keep peace in our country. And by the way, you'll have less welfare when you do that too, because California right now, because of us taxpayers, have 34% of the nation's welfare. And if you go back and look at Lyndon Johnson's Great Society in 1964, Poverty rate, I think, was 12%, and now we've spent $11 trillion later, and it's 2 or 3 points higher. So basically, it hasn't worked. And by the way, the reason it doesn't is because government usually takes over those programs. But when you look at all the nonprofits and churches and stuff like that, they do more bang for your buck. Your top 100 charities in America, for every dollar you donate to them, they get over 85 cents in the hands of the people they want to help. Not so in Sacramento. I've done a few studies. You're lucky to get 40 cents on the dollar because these guys are ridiculous salaries and lifetime benefits and pensions that they're getting on supposedly helping the poor, and they're not responsible for results, for producing results. So we, the people, have to change those things, guys. And one of the things we have to do is, I don't mind, my friend here said earlier about we want to be peaceful, and I agree with that, but I like what Reagan said. If you can't make politicians see the light, make them feel the heat. And so, so I kind of like that, taking that avenue, guys. But these things have to be stopped before we can go on. And we have to, again, restore what made our country great. And that are those political principles contained in our U.S. Constitution and Declaration of Independence, which we need to restore back to its rightful place in American political life, especially for the younger generation, because there's so much debt coming their way. It's going to be overwhelming for them. And again, that's our responsibility. My dad, as many years, he fought in World War II, got shot once, had malaria twice. And I asked him, what were you doing? And he goes, I was fighting for you. And I said, I wasn't even born then. He goes, you're stupid and don't know what. It's what men do, man, when they love their country. They fight for the next generation. And so I think maybe that's where I got a little bit of my patriotic fervor was from him. Took me a little while. 16, I didn't think he was very smart, but at 21, I realized he'd gotten a lot smarter. So anyway. So earlier I mentioned, is there hope for California? I do, and let me say this. My first, I've been up there now 7 years. My first 5 years, it's been very, very hard. But the last 2 years, there's been some interesting things going on. So I want to give you 3 what I call key leading indicators that I believe that perhaps something is going on, and and that's why it's good to never give up, or never give in, or never flinch, or falter. So anyway, but before I want to talk about Sir Winston Churchill. Any of you guys see The Darkest Hour yet? Well, if you haven't, you need to go see that. It's a great movie because look at, London was going to lose. They were being bombed 57 consecutive nights in a row. And France was taking over, Germany, Czechoslovakia, and all the parliaments against this guy. But he believed there was hope. And a turn of events happened, perhaps a miracle by God, that he didn't get kicked out of Parliament. But during all these dark days and the bombings, Churchill says this in 1941, when great causes are on the move in the world, stirring all men's souls, drawing them from their firesides, casting aside comfort, wealth, and a pursuit of happiness in response to impulses at once awe-striking and irresistible, we learn that we are spirits, not animals, and that there's something going on in space and time and beyond space and time which spells duty. The point is, we don't know what's going up in the heavenlies. We could be ready to get nuked today or set free tomorrow, but it's always our job and our responsibility to fight for our country and again for our kids and their kids. And ladies and gentlemen, I believe things are on the move here in California. And again, 3 things. A couple of things, and again, Churchill, he talked about the socialists in Europe as well as the Nazis, why he was convinced Great Britain would win. And that's because they had politically correct speech back then too. They didn't call it that. But he said when they can no longer defend their arguments, they're reduced to blaming and accusing. And he says that makes them weak. And that sounds familiar. I hear that 2 days a week when I'm on the floor in California, right? They're blaming, accusing. They can't argue, and they go into a tizzy. And you guys hear it on the news nationally. This is a sign in history. But the other solution to that is God's people have to stand up and can't be silent. Our sin has been silence. We have to refute these things, and we have to do it with a smile, as Churchill said, and we have to learn those important things and refute this bad doctrine. So that's the first thing, is as long as they continue to blame and accuse, it means they've lost their arguments, and that does make them weak, and the people know that. Second of all, when I first got elected, since I'm in the minority party, there was an article about the senator next to me in the district next to me and mine, and she had like 17 more people than I did. Her staff was like 3 times bigger, so kind of tweaked me a little bit, right? But he who has gold makes the rules, and so I didn't get any gold. So what I did is I started hiring interns, and I felt a little guilty because the average senator probably hires 3 to 5 interns per year, and that year I went over 60 interns, right? And so I had those boys working too, you know. So I've reduced it to about 40 a year, and what I've done is we work them hard because we want to produce results for my district as well as other places, but I also feel an obligation to teach them something. So we've developed a syllabus, and it's got Constitution 101 by Hillsdale College, if you've ever heard that. Thank you. Are you clapping for me or Hillsdale College? Hey, our 2 boys went to Hillsdale, by the way. So, yeah, that's why I like them. And I learned vicariously through them, by the way. I was a late bloomer. But anyway, so then we also have some selected writings of the Federalist Papers, and we start them off on the Hillsdale Dialogues with a 32-minute interview with Plutarch. And then one by Ethics and Aristotle, and we see if they take it from there. And it's been great. My wife believes this is the most important job that perhaps that I do in the Senate is training these young people. And I got to tell you, I've been pleasantly surprised because I don't care what party they come from. These kids, they want to know. You just can't give them a flip answer. You got to work for it, right? And some of them, you know, they're not the snowflakes as they've been called, at least the ones that we get. Some of these young people, they're different from my generation in the fact that they may be liberal and brought up through liberal education, but if you give them a concise argument and you prove it to them, they're truth seekers, guys, and there's something that is wonderful about that. It's high and noble. Another thing, too, they feel like perhaps they've been screwed over a little bit by our generation and our government, so they're looking for answers. And so the results we've been producing have been pretty impressive, and we even have people that have gone to other senators' offices, congressional offices, Department of Finance, Department of Health and Human Services. We even had one guy, his name Elliot. He called me. He says, "Hey, Senator Morrell, I'm working in the press corps in the White House now." And he said, "I just want to call and thank you." And I said, "Okay, Elliot, here's what. You succeed and do well. I'm going to take credit for that. I said, but if you blow it, I'm going to deny I ever knew you, you know." So, but anyway, I'm just impressed with, I don't know if I just get lucky and get these great young people who are serious-minded, but you spend time with them, they're pretty impressive. So there is hope for that next generation, which means there's hope for our country. Third and not last, you know, we have a very rich history here in California. We have 12 missions that were planted here, as you know. World Vision was founded here, focused on the families, Campus Crusade. The Azusa Street Revivals produced 68 million, I think, Pentecostals throughout the world. Then my daughter and I took her up to the Big Bear area, Forest Home. Have you guys ever heard of Forest Home? It's a Christian retreat center, father-daughter weekend. And we walked on the back side of this lake, and there's a big wooden cross there, and at the bottom there's a plaque dedicated to a young man who came to Forest Home, and there he believed God had called him to preach the gospel of the world. And the name on that plaque is Billy Graham, you know? You know, I think about the city of Santa Cruz means the cross. I look at our building, the Capitol that we're at, and hidden in the bushes is statues of 3 nuns, the Sisters of Mercy, who dedicated that land to our capital. And then the very name of Sacramento means sacraments. So I don't believe Providence has given up on California. It's just we want to make sure we don't give up on California, guys. And so another thing too, because I'm trying to get a lot in here, but Alexis de Tocqueville came to America around 1850, wrote this book, Democracy in America. It's about 700 pages trying to find the secret of our success. We have these 2 vast oceans which separates us from our natural enemies, great natural resources, but he said, I found the greatness when I walked into the churches and saw that the pulpits were aflame with righteousness, you know. And he said, America's great because America's good. And once we stop being good, we'll stop being great. And basically he said, he said the strength of America was from the pulpits because politics is theology applied. And what that means, everything starts in the pulpit, then it goes into the pews, and in popular culture, then it ends up in politics. So if you want to take a temperature reading on how strong the pulpit is, you'd look at the end result, politics. And so I don't think the pulpit's that strong in America. There's some strong pulpits, but that depends upon you guys. There's enough user-friendly, seeker-sensitive pastors out there that you guys have to encourage them. Remember, Scripture says you don't want to, what is the seventh thing God hates, and one of them is a brother who causes dissension. So you want to be nice about it and everything, but you got to push these guys because there's no pastor on God's green earth here that has a right to avoid those tough scriptures, you know, and we, the Holy Father will not move until I think we move, and we're not afraid to talk about the tough issues, which the pastor agree with that. So thank you. So with that said, you know, Lincoln too, by the way, the slavery issue on that was a thing in their day, and in 1857, Dred Scott's decision that he was personal property, the Supreme Court. Law of the land, as they say, it can't be reversed. 1858, Lincoln runs against Douglas for Senate and runs on that platform and does a speech that's famous today, but it's one of the reasons he lost back then. It's a house divided speech from the book of Matthew. The house divided will not stand. So Douglas said, this guy Lincoln's calling down judgment from heaven. So that's one of the reasons Lincoln lost. So anyway, he comes back in 1860 and he runs again, kind of on the same platform. And I'm sure the Republicans were, you know, they want to win. You can't blame them, but they weren't his first choice. If you know that convention, it took 3 times, 3 votes for Lincoln to finally become the nominee. And then when he won, if I remember correctly, he only won with about 41% of the votes. So he did worse than Donald Trump. So anyway, but at the end, in his next election, read it if you get a chance. My personal opinion is it's the second inaugural address, and he's going to talk about, because people are asking, when's this war going to end? So he addresses the question, because there's over 600,000 people, Americans, that died. That's more than World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, and all the other things, and our country was real small at the time. And, you know, it's kind of interesting because he doesn't blame slavery. By the way, his speeches, he didn't read the political handbook that you're supposed to talk about new beginnings, hope, and change, and all these bright things. He's pretty somber in it, right? But he lays out on the question of slavery, and he doesn't blame the slaveholders, you know, or the Democrats who were promoting slavery. He says, you know, remember, it's us who pray to the same God, read from the same Bible, and subscribe to a faith in a living God, you know. And I guess what he's trying to say is we were silent on those issues, right? Yeah, and then he says, let me tell you, then he gets hard. He says, let me tell you when this war will end. He says, when every drop of blood from the lash has been replaced by another pulled from the sword, then the war will be over. And he said the reason why is just as it was said 3,000 years ago, so it's true today, that the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. And, you know, and I think about that in the thing about, you know, if these babies in a womb, if they're just tissue, perhaps we have nothing to worry about. But if they are human beings created in the image of God, what would Lincoln say? Would we be responsible for that today? And so I think there's some serious things that we need to be thinking, and we need to be reminding our pastors. But in the meantime, if they don't get involved, we need to get involved and do these marches, which is a good thing that you're doing. So thank you for that. Those are important. So the last thing I'll tell you, the hope, though. So we had one pastor up in the Capitol. Then another one came in and said, hey, do you another pastor, right? And I go, yeah, you can always use another pastor up here. A lot of people, right? Then a third one came, and it was like one of the worst days that I had ever had up in the Capitol. He sort of came at the wrong time, you know? And so my wife likes to kid me. He says, because sometimes I'll alienate people, and she goes, oh, you're out making friends again, huh? But anyway, he came in and he said, would you like another pastor up here, and who would come up here and encourage you guys? And I said, not today. I said, no. I said, I'm looking for men of God who are willing to stand firm and fight for a change, you know? And so his wife was with him, and I just got the feeling she liked me. So he left, and about 3 days later, he came back and he says, if I brought 50 Baptist pastors up here, will you tell them just what you told me? And I said, I'd be happy to tell them that. So anyway, here's what's happened, guys, in the last year or so that gives me so much hope. He brought 50, and then the next thing, I'm speaking to a pastor's conference in Long Beach of 110, a pastor's conference in San Bernardino 200, a pastor's conference Riverside of 100, one in Woodland of 40, then Visalia, then some wealthy Orange County donor invited almost 200 pastors back to Washington, D.C. for 4 days and paid for their trip. And they asked me to come back there and sort of, I think, do the closing speech for them and everything. And so this thing just has grown very, very fast, and I'm just crazy. So about 3 weeks ago, we had 200 pastors, different pastors, not from the same organization, come up to the Capitol. And they told me a couple months ahead of time they wanted to be trained on how to take back California, guys. Yeah, so. And so it was awesome because I kept track. How many do you have in your church? A guy gave me a spreadsheet, but he also added on there, some of them have radio programs and influence. And those 200 pastors, not the other 300 or 400 I've spoken to, but just the guys who came have an influence about 2.3 million people in California. And that's enough numbers for us to win. And let me tell you, I made fun of the Bay Area before I came over here. I told him, I said, I didn't know there was any Christians over here, And so, kind of rude, huh? But I don't get over here much. But, just seeing this room today has been an encouragement, and I can tell the quality of people here. You guys are sincere about your faith, and you love your country. And I know there's many more like you that need to come out of the closet, right? And so the thing is God hasn't given up. So what I decided to do a few months ago, I started writing op-eds. Instead of just sending them to my district, I actually sent them up here to some of the local newspapers, and they printed them. And I go online to see how many people hate Mike Morrell. But I got to tell you, the majority of them actually like what I was saying. And we even got a phone call from a guy who says, there's been any Republicans writing anything in this Bay area for 20 years. So I think the thing is we've got to engage, and that's why I was honored to come over here today, because I was born in the state, raised in the state, married in the state, raised my kids in the state. I'm not giving it up that easy, so thank you. So let me read one last thing by Churchill, and then when I'm done, he says Q&A, I say easy questions. So again, Churchill, you got to go see the movie, okay? He said this: our future and that of many generations is at stake. We are sure that the character of the human society will be shaped by the resolves we take and the deeds we do. We need not bewail the fact that we have been called upon to face such a solemn responsibilities. We may be proud and even rejoice amidst our tribulations that we have been born at this cardinal time for so great an age and so splendid an opportunity of service here below. Thank you guys very much. Easy question.
It's more of a statement than a question.
Statement.
And if you could repeat the question
Yeah.
before we get a second mic, so everybody can hear.
I just want to remind everybody that a week from today, our Supreme Court is going to hear the case about the California legislation AB 775, which has forced pro-life pregnancy centers and clinics to promote abortion. It's forced speech instead of free speech. So this legislation is being challenged, and the Supreme Court is going to hear it. Alliance Defending Freedom is presenting the case. We need your prayers, please. Okay? It's very important. It could really change things and set a precedent to stop the badgering that's going on against pro-life legislation and pro-life activity of compassion in our country. So let's put a stop to it and take advantage of this amazing historic opportunity that we have. Okay? All I'm asking you to do is pray and stay informed. Thank you.
Yeah, question. In the state of California, we passed a law, I think it was about 15, 20 years ago, that if a pregnant woman is injured or if her infant is killed, that the perpetrator can be charged with murder. So how can the state of California take that stance and not take a stance against abortion?
That's more of a statement. I think you guys know the obvious on that. We have, again, we have the wrong people. Remember, a couple of things I hear today. Term limits, throw the bums out. Sometimes I was in an audience and I heard this lady saying that, throw the bum out, and I realized it was my wife, and it was really embarrassing. I'm only kidding. She would never say that. She would never say that. But you know, people want term limits. They want part-time legislatures. None of that's going to work. Here's why. We need good people, ladies and gentlemen. And when you go, I was up on stage like this at the Redlands or Riverside Chamber. And I've got two of my friends on the other side all across from me. And we're at the chamber. And they're saying they're pro-business. Yeah, we're pro-business just like Morrell, you know. Because I got like, the worst I have done so far, I think, is a 96 or 98% rating for business and usually 100%. This guy over here got a 16% and this guy got like a 32%, right? And it's embarrassing, but I couldn't let him get away with that, right? And so I just said, by the way, let me just share the difference here. His score is this is mine. So there's a big chasm between us. And the reason I mention that, I always hate doing that, but I just felt obligated to do it. When politicians go to unions, they speak in unionese. You know, when they go to churches, they'll speak in Christianese. What politicians want to say I'm anti-business? You need to read those scores of my friends across the aisle. The highest last year was 51. Then it dropped to like 26, and then below that. And so, you know, they know their audience when they go into an audience. And so we have to get better at really seeking out people's voting records, you see, because some of these people are not led by obviously our Constitution, and remember that there's something beautiful about that, because it's not a living document. It's founded upon, it rests upon the Declaration of Independence, which first paragraph says, the laws of nature, and nature is God, meaning God places into human nature, economy, politics, and morality the law that never changes throughout history. And that's why the next sentence in there says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Yeah. And so the thing is, they have forgotten the laws of nature, and nature is God. You know, all these bills that they do is contrary to the laws of nature. And if you ever want to read deeper on that, John Locke, of course, the great attorney, knew about that. And so that's part of the challenge, is we just have people that, you know, they've gone away from their roots, and we have to remind them on arguments like that, because they don't make any sense. But a lot of bills don't make any sense.
We have a question over here. I just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure we got to all the questions.
So you mentioned at the beginning of your speech about one of the most important things we need to discuss is religion and politics. In service of that, we started a group about a year ago that basically helps a lot of our friends, high school and college age, to discuss those things and be intentional about that, discussing that every month. And so my question would be, because we serve a very small group of friends, about 15 people, all within our church or homeschool circles, how do you think that younger Americans, high school and college age, can be more of an influence outside of just the church circle or school circles?
Okay, so let me, it's a pretty darn good question. What's your name?
Marco.
Marco. Polo. I bet you never heard that one before, huh? Okay, so Dr. Larry Arnn, years ago, this kind of bare in my soul, I did terrible in school. I was blind in my left eye. There was a growth back there, so my first 4 grades, they wanted to hold me back. Finally, because I couldn't read, right? Finally, they removed the growth. I was good at baseball and felt I didn't need an education. So my parents were both high school dropouts, and they just wanted me to get through school. So that's what I did. And in college, I got worse and went to a junior college, which they now call community colleges. But and then at 22 is when I became a Christian and sort of found that better way, you know. And then probably about 35, I met Dr. Larry Arnn, and he said, I can tell, you know, because he was in Southern California at a think tank at that time. He says, you know, I can tell you love your country. And he says, you know, the next big battle is not going to come from guns and swords, but it's going to be the battle of ideas. And so he said, he threw down a gauntlet to me. He says, if you really love your country, you'll learn some of these things. And so he said, I'll start you off with Ethics by Aristotle, which it was written in English, but it looked like it was written in Greek to me. Took me, it's pretty hard to understand. And I still don't understand. And the other one was Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica, which I read, And that was another tough book. But you know what? Somehow I got disciplined because I did love my country. I really appreciated him. And then I started learning my arguments. And in fact, in Thomas Paine's Common Sense, he makes a point. I'm just going to upgrade it in modern day thing. He says you don't need to yell, you don't need to throw bombs, you don't have to act like you're passionate. If you really understand your political ideologies and you've taken your time to learn those things, he said you'll be solid and be able to argue your points. And so that's really what you need to do is you're at an age, because once you get married, you got to have all those kids and a wife, and your wife wants a Mercedes. You got to put in a lot of hours, right? So you want to do as much learning as you can now and read some of those great books, and I'd recommend Hillsdale College to you too on that, or any college that teaches the great books. And if you can't go to a college like that, make sure you read them because you're young, and keep defining those arguments, because what you want to do is stand on the shoulders of those heroes who went before us, like Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, Thomas Aquinas, Lincoln. They wrote some wonderful things. It's like the thing that I appreciate about Hillsdale. Today you go to college and they give you books written by professors who, think they possess all the wisdom. But Hillsdale only reads original texts, and so their thinking is, why read a book about Lincoln when there's so much to read that Lincoln wrote? Why read a book about Churchill when he wrote 50 books? So you read original text. But that's where I would spend my time now. And for a quick view of history, go on your podcast, do the Hillsdale Dialogues. You get a history lesson every 32 minutes since the first book on Western culture was written. I think it was Herodias. Next question, or is that the last one?
We have him right here.
Thank you, Marco. Yeah, you're very welcome.
You talked about the Republican Party being on the defensive in the California legislature, and you talked about a change in tactics as far as going, I guess, on the attack, if you will. I'm going to be running for California State Senate in the upcoming election, so if you have any pointers for me.
Yeah, here's the pointers. Again, get your political beliefs down, and you don't have to, I never call anybody out, or rarely do I do that, I should say. Sometimes I'm blowing it, but you don't want to make fun of the person, but you definitely want to make sure people know how they voted. So you want to define them on what they believe, and then you want to tell them what you believe. And let people choose. Margaret Thatcher says, first make the argument, then you'll get the vote. And that's one thing that I'm having a hard time. I've tried to recruit candidates. I've been asked to do that. And there's not too many people that really understand the political principles of limited government. We all call upon the Constitution, but to actually understand some of those things, what it means, is a whole different thing. So you want to learn those arguments, and you want to learn how they voted, and you want to make those distinctions. And one thing too, Churchill in his dark years, when he got booted out of the place that he did, he would go speak to groups as small as 5 people, 10 people all over Great Britain, because he knew what he believed. And guess what? 10 years later, his opportunity came again. But he would speak to anyone he could and everyone he could, because he believed in the things that he believed in. He knew Hitler was bad, and he knew he was going to be called upon someday to save Great Britain. So that's what you need to do. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for allowing me to be here today. Thank you.